Right guys, bit of an update on the Celica because it's been like a couple of years since I've done it. So it's still the same old RA60 Celica. It's had a RA65 rear clip which has pretty much been screwed on, which is now just a shell. Otherwise it's still RA60. 65 indicators on it just because they were better than what I had. The motor is a 302 Windsor. It's looking a little ugly because it kind of gets rained on quite a lot. It's started life as a 289 block, but it's got 302 internals, bored out to I believe a 306. Bottom end was apparently built for about 400 horsepower when my stepdad had it, but I never got those heads. So it's got stock heads on it with a mild port work. Still got a stock camshaft. It's got some old school 600 on it with 750 fuel bowls. That's just an XF throttle cable which has a little return spring built in, so that was good. This side extractor is an old cut up SR20 turbo manifold which has just been blasted and butchered to suit my application. Davis Craig water pump over there, and under that's an LS1 alternator which I've converted to run a serpentine belt on this motor. Even though the motor is an old school carby version, it's not the AFI, so it's it's got the old school water pump set up, but I've just gone to an electric pump instead. Radiator is a WRX with my attempt of building a fan shroud on it because I've had troubles with the stock Mishimoto fans. So I've got one Mishimoto there, and that one's just a larger generic fan which was bigger than the radiator itself, so I've had to make the fan shroud. Down here I've got an Astra power steering pump which is still a fluid pump but runs the Toyota rack as per normal. It's just electronically controlled. That's a bypass reg, so I'm actually running a Bosch 044 fuel pump, which is absolutely absurd because I only use about 7 pound pressure. They're all 1/2 inch lines, but that does the job, and what fuel I don't use I just return back to tank, so it doesn't bother me. People mention heat in the fuel system. Never had an issue with it. It's never bothered me, never bothered the car. It's always ran sweet otherwise, so no problem there. That's a Land Cruiser clutch master, which was apparently close, but as you can see by the hole in the back, it actually wasn't. Unfortunately, just it is a little bit cockeyed. It's not quite straight, but what are you going to do? It works, so it doesn't bother me. Still a stock Toyota booster and master. Handset's all rusted as shit. I did actually paint that, and then obviously must have spilt something on it or never prepped it properly. Again, motor's been out in the weather for quite a bit because unfortunately I've given up my shed and I am outdoors. So yeah. Gearbox is a 4-speed top loader. Just your old school style. It's got some Aussie speed shifter on it, which is not really overly great. I've got to do something about tightening up the shifter boot itself. The shifter itself, I find that it does come loose, and even though I've tightened it up multiple times, it's been a pain in the ass. So I think I'm just going to weld a tab and weld a sleeved collar in and run a bolt through it. That way it can be as loose as it wants. As long as that bolt's in there, it's not going to move. That'll probably fix that. I do find the shifter to be a little bit notchy. I think it might be an Aussie speed shifter, I'm not sure. But that's just a shifter I got given for stuff all. Got my 3 Autometer ultralight 2 gauges. Great stuff, love them. Don't mind the fact that the wideband's floating, it's just where I shut it off at the time. And I've just had it running, but I've had to shut it off now because it's getting too dark. Under there I've got MSD Street Fire ignition and just a generic fuse panel and relay panel for running everything. SAS gauge, because I didn't really care about the quality of the rev gauge when I built the car. It's not really overly important to me. I know roughly what the revs are. They don't need to be super accurate for me. So yeah, it gets what it gets. Hydraulic handbrake, pretty basic setup. Just got a Willwood Master. Had to modify it a little bit. You can see it's sleeved about here, and there's another one down under there. And under that is a brake tap, but it's currently not working because I now only run front brakes. Which, going to front brakes, I have R32 calipers off a GDST, and they're actually Z32 or 300ZX rotors, which have been modified to suit my 4-stud. These are great because you can actually pull the pad out the back of the or out the top of the caliper and not have to pull your rotors off or anything, so there's no dicking around there. They're a pretty good setup. Had no issues with it. As for suspension, probably a bit hard to tell. Actually, might go around from the front here. Might see a little bit more, maybe. So I've got Techno Toy Tuning, their coilover sleeve kit, which is basically just an adjustable spring perch. You can see the adjustment there. And down there is just a bit of fence tube I welded to the strut to hold it in place. And then I've used urethane underneath the coil sleeve to just clamp it all together so it doesn't rattle. So I found that those coils rattled a little bit. Some basic S13 camber top, which pretty much is bolted straight on. Filed these holes out about 1 millimeter, but as you can tell, you'd never even know that they've been filed. It's that small. I've got GN Sigma lower control arms, which are 50mm longer than stock, pretty much bolt straight up. And as you can see down there, I've actually used 2 bolts from the bolt-in ball joint, which is what I like about these Sigma arms, to bolt the stock caster rod back in. I've got 40mm roll center adjusters in there, RA40 tie rods, R32 braided brake line. Yeah, 40mm roll center adjusters are in there as well. And I've got cut and shut steering knuckles to suit RA60 steel. That's a little bit hard to see, unfortunately, but they are 105mm from the center of tie rod to the center of the ball joint. There you go, you can see the Toyota arm in there a little bit better. Hydraulic rack, so I don't run any spacers because I hear that there's nothing but issues. I'll probably look into tightening that back up to that little hole up there. It's just something I haven't quite gotten around to, but I'll do that soon. Wheels are just a pretty generic 15x8. I think these are a positive 5 offset, and I really don't care what tyres I've got. So I've got some Toyotas on here at the moment. I think they are, but seriously, if they've got canvas hanging out of them, I'd probably still drive on them. I really don't care. My steering knuckles are 0 Ackerman, so I find I don't actually have that much tyre wear at all. As you can see, tyres fairly even, considering I've got 5.5 degrees of camber. I also run about 7 degrees of caster. Never had any issues of binding. As you can see, it's not crazy low. I mean, I do like to be able to turn at high speed and not actually have anything scrub, but it still doesn't look too bad. That's just a cooler off the Astra Power steering pump. I think it's just off the VN Commodore, just a stocky there. And the radiator's a WRX STI off an 05. Driver side exhaust is just a stock header. I've got that merging into twin 2.25 inch pipes, which run all right up to the diff, and then they merge into a single 3-inch down here. Bit dark, but you get the idea. There's a merge just under there, which, yeah, I've, bit hard to tell, you can kind of see it, but I've got lobster bends because I'm a cheap ass and it was easier to build it like that. So yeah.